Good morning, everyone. I am April Nioda from 3BPEDC. Today, I am going to present my report for Round 1 entitled Performance-Based Assessment in Module 4. So, start first with the letter A, Nature of Performance-Based Assessment. So, performance-based assessments have returned to prominence in educational literature and curriculum. Performance-based evaluations replaced conventional multiple-choice examinations as a reliable substitute during 1990s, meaning it is a set of strategies for the acquisition and application of knowledge, skills, and work habits. Also, it is a substitute to a multiple-choice examination during 1990s where students will perform their tasks instead of using a paper-pencil test. According to PALM 2008, performance-based assessments varies greatly depending on the author, disciple, publication, and intended audience. Performance-based assessments measures how well the students can use the abilities and knowledge acquired throughout a unit or units of study. It means that it provides the teacher with information about how students understand and applies knowledge when they are having a performance-based assessment. In addition, performance-based assessment requires students to perform that they have mastered specific skills and competencies by demonstrating something. So next is the essential components of a performance-based assessment. The performance-based assessment must appropriately reflect one or more distinct course criteria. So, here are the distinct course criteria. Now, number 1, complex. The number 2, authentic. So, number 3, it must be process or product-oriented. And the number 4, it must be open-ended. And the last is, it must be. So, in the process in creating performance-based assessment, in assessing a student, there should be an appropriate process in creating a performance-based assessment. So, the following process are number 1, identify goals of the performance-based assessment. In this process, the teacher wanted to challenge the learners to use critical thinking and problem-solving skills so that students do not rely on the teacher's direction about how to complete each step of the assessment. Number 2, select the appropriate course standards, which means if the goals will be identified, a teacher must select a common core standards that is needed to be addressed with a performance assessment. A teacher must decide and consider that the assessment should measure the understanding of conditional probability and rules of probability of the students. Number 3, review assessments and identify learning gaps. In this process is a very important step considering that a teacher should check the current worksheet of each student who are completing for the unit. A teacher should check and identify if what are the missing activities of a particular student and must decide to create a performance-based assessments since it is also a reality-based. Number 4, design the scenario. In this process, a teacher should make a brainstorming session where it includes the setting, role, audience, time frame, and product in order for the students also to develop their creativity. Number 5, gather or create materials. A teacher must gather or create some materials so that the students will be having an interest with the performance assessment that has been created by the teacher. Number 6, develop a learning plan. In this part, a teacher should strike a balance between teaching the content and preparing students for the task. It also needs to be reviewed and revised depending on students' learning needs. So let's proceed to letter B, performance-based learning competencies. Learning objectives. The learning objectives in process-oriented performance-based assessment are directly indicated in the student's outwardly perceptible behaviors. As sets or clusters of talents and abilities required for a specific task, competencies are referred to. So, in learning objectives, before the students will perform their task, a teacher should teach the students the lessons or all the lessons in order for the students attain the learning objectives of the. So it is basically understandable, which means the simple competency is direct instruction. The complex competency is more on two or more critical than the other example. So for the letter C is the task designing. Task number 1 is generalizability. The probability that the success of the learners on one assignment will translate to other tasks of a similar nature. It means that it is general, where if a student is success in one activity, it is possible also that it will also success in the other activities. Next one is multiple foci, the task that evaluates a number of academic outcomes. So it means that the performance of a student will be judged with a different number of outcomes. The next one is authenticity. The assignment is reflective of what the learners could encounter in the actual world rather than being limited to the classroom. So in authenticity, it means that if a teacher will give a performance-based assessment, it should be authentic so that the students can relate it to the reality. So next one is the teachability. Teachability, the work enables one to develop the necessary competence. Next is feasibility. The task can be completed within a reasonable amount of time, money, space, and equipment needed. Next is the fairness. The task is given to all learners equally, regardless of their social status or gender. So in fairness, it should be fair to all the learners despite of their differences. So the task must be equally delivered to the students. So next one is scorability. Ability to assess the task properly and dependably. So it means that in this part, a student can be judged by having a score. Holistic rubrics. Holistic rubrics is a single criteria rubrics or one-dimensional. It is also used to evaluate participants' overall performance on a task or item in accordance with set standards of performance. And it is a performance descriptions are typically written in entire phrases and paragraphs. So for example, we only have two columns in holistic rubric. For example, the score in the first column, and the second column is the word criteria. So in the first column, which is the score, it is where it is involves the numbering, which is the 5 4 3 2 1 scoring, and the second column is the criteria, where this part will be based of scoring of performance of an individual. So the next is analytic rubrics. It is a two-dimensional rubrics containing assessment criteria in rows and achievement level in columns, and it also allows you to use a single rubric to evaluate the performance of the students. So in analytic rubric, for example, we also have tables in analytic rubrics, which includes the criteria and the standards. For example, belong to the standards are adequate, competent, good, and excellent, where these are the basis of scoring in the performance of an individual or of the student. So letter E, rubrics. It is a rubrics is a scoring guide used to judge students' work. So it is the time where the performance of a student should be evaluated. So there are types of rubrics. Number 1, task specific rubrics, where it is scoring guidelines appropriate for evaluating responses to just one task. So it only apply in scoring a performance of a student in just one task. Then number two, hyper general rubrics, where it is excessively unclear and confusing rating guidelines. So in this type of rubrics, it doesn't advisable to use as scoring a performance because it is very confusing. So in last type of rubrics is skill focused rubrics, where it is a grading guidelines for determining whether learners have mastered the skill that is being tested. So it is best used to score a performance of a learner, because in this part you can identify if he or she is demonstrating the skill correctly, and the best example for this is skill test. So for the last part, letter F, sources of error in scoring student performance. So I am not sure in this part because I cannot find any of the Google sources of error in scoring in Google. So I've decided that I put this. So for me, it is the performance evaluation frequently depend on a particular skill set possessed by the student, such as creativity, flexibility, or willingness to speak in front of an audience. So meaning in this performance evaluation, a student should demonstrate a skill, or should present a task in front of many people, or when you are performing a performance evaluation, a student must be creative, flexible, or willingness to speak in front of many people in order for him or her to succeed or to survive the task. So another, learners who may not feel particularly creative or willing to communicate their knowledge in front of a large group may suffer from the disadvantages of performance-based assessment. So in this phrase, I've come up that for those learners or for those students who are not so confident when performing a task in front of many people, it is one of the sources of error in scoring a student performance, because you cannot give a high score when the performance of a learner or a student is not so good, because they are not feel particularly creative, or they are not feel the moment that they are presenting themselves with their task in front of many people, or they are not willing to communicate with their knowledge with the other people, so that they will not um, um, they may suffer from getting low grades. So for me, it is one of the sources of error in scoring student performance when a teacher gives a task, but the student or a learner is not willing to present it in front of the people. So this is all of my report. That's all. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much. God bless us all.